So, hopefully you can all see this screen. Welcome to the Contact a Family webinar. If there's a technical hitch, please do bear with us, and those of you joining by PC, laptop, tablet or smartphone should now be able to see this introduction slide. As there are so many attendees, it's not practical for verbal questions to be taken, so you will all remain muted throughout. If at any point you have questions, please use the question icon on your GoToWebinar toolbar on your screen. This will allow you to type your question into the text box and submit this to the webinar administrator. We will then select as many relevant questions to answer as time allows. If similar questions are received, we're going to condense these where possible. What we would say is post your questions at any stage of the webinar. We're going to be with you for an hour, but it may be, rather than save your questions to the end, the earlier you post them, the better, really. What we will do is, if we can't cover the questions, we're going to collate them in a document, and they will be answered and posted onto the Contact a Family website, along with a recording of this webinar and handouts, details of which will be circulated next week. And we would ask you at the end of the webinar, there's a short questionnaire that's going to launch, and we'd ask you to just take a few minutes to complete this, because that really will help us to plan for future webinars and look at dates. Okay, so let's begin with introductions. Hi, I'm Barbara Wilson. I'm a Contact a Family associate based in East London. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Kulwinder Bola, the chair of the Luton Parent Carer Forum and co-chair of the Eastern Region. Say hello.
Hi everyone, my name's Kulwinder and I have the pleasure of being the chair of the Luton Forum and also the chair of the Eastern Region Forum. And yes, I'm delighted to be here too, and hopefully it'll be a really interesting webinar for you. Just to give you a little bit of background, I started off working in policy and advice for looked after children in London, working for a range of pan-London organisations, but then moved into research and evaluation, specialising in Black and Asian minority ethnic education and health research.
Great, thank you. So we've got just over 30 slides to talk to, and we're going to be flitting between us throughout the webinar. And we're going to aim to leave about 5–10 minutes at the end to look at any questions. So remember to post them as we go along. And a big thank you to Ruth, who's behind the scenes doing the technical stuff, and to Gail for hosting us today.
Right, so making your case. This is all about forums, getting and presenting a strong case to influence things for the better. We can do this in a range of ways. You can collect information using surveys, put all that together in an annual report, have meetings, focus groups, use media and online media, and obviously the telephone. The key thing to use and remember is that information can and should be used to change and make improvements.
So what we're going to try and cover today, we'll talk about why evidence is important, some key principles on carrying out research or gathering data, where you can go to find more about your local area or issues, recording what you're told, the options on some approaches, and then presenting that information. We wanted to say a big thank you to Karen and all at Positive Parents in Havering, because they've been able to share some of their good practice with us, which we'll share with you today, and to Sarah Lee and Julie Singleton for advising us on good practice across the country. Part of the follow-up we'd ask for you to do is to share examples of good practice with your advisor and within your regional network meetings. You're all making your case all of the time, and it's just good to actually capture those examples. We really won't be able to cover everything that we'd like to do in an hour, so we are going to have handouts available that will cover jargon busting, so the use of language, a bit of a checklist for forums to look at in terms of making your case, and any good practice. So when we're referencing reports and things as we go through, they will all be in our follow-up handouts. And what we would urge you to do is to use the material in this webinar to help your forum plan how you can evidence your work in 2016. Okay, so why is evidence important? We thought we would start here with the Social Care Institute for Excellence quote. I'll just give you a moment to read that. And both myself and Kulwinder think that the really key words here are reliable, so that the evidence you give is reliable, and also it's the real importance about making a difference, so those better outcomes for people using services and their carers.
Right, so why is evidence important? Slide 2. Well, local authorities and clinical commissioning groups make decisions using evidence and focus on outcomes, so it's really important that evidence is accurate. It's also good practice for forums to provide parent representatives with facts and figures so that they can accurately represent the forum in strategic level meetings. This gives the parent carer the confidence they need to be and say what they need to say in meetings. In addition, evidence-based approach also helps a local authority have confidence in the forum. In Luton, it's been really useful to know our baseline membership. We've used this information to identify the background of our families, the age of their children, and what SEND their children have. We've presented this information in a pictorial form, and this has actually really been useful in making our case with education, health and social care within the town. For instance, the first graph there that you see entitled Membership of Children and Young People with SEND shows the range, the 6 most common prevalences of SEND in Luton children, ASD being the highest. We then identified our membership by ethnicity. We were able to break down a range of families from different ethnic groups, and this has helped the forum be recognised across health and social care and education due to the fact that we have 25% of families from the BME community. Lastly, the graph at the bottom, members, children and young people by age, has been really useful for families themselves as well as the local authority in identifying the needs to have better information around transition. So this is just a very simple example of how information can be used to support your case and give your forum a bit more credibility.
Great. And one of the things we did want to emphasise when you're at meetings at a strategic level, that we know that everybody starts from the perspective of their personal testimony, because that's the starting point for everybody. And you may well have had to retell your story many, many times. And obviously strategic meetings are not the place for this. But if you know that 10, 20 or maybe 30 other families have had similar experiences and you can document that and put it forward, then that is then evidence at a meeting.
Right, so what is research? We've used this Oxford Modern English Dictionary definition. It's a systematic investigation into a study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. The key words really there are systematic, facts and reaching accurate conclusions.
And I think some of those similar words, Kulwinder, that we're talking about in terms of that definition are interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. Investigating, testing, analysing, fact-finding are really useful words to also have in your vocabulary there. Okay.
So we're going to cover some key principles. Now, we don't expect you, having listened to this webinar for an hour, to become researchers. Some of you may be researchers already, but what we think it's useful to understand is that in the field of research that there are standards of codes of conduct and ethical issues that underpin everything that's being done. And these are all very good ways of working, and we think they translate and you can use them within your forum. Now, the first thing is informed consent. So you have to be really clear and transparent in your purpose. You may be having a meeting and you may be helping with some consultation. So people need to know that how their views and experiences are going to be used. What's the purpose of that? So you're giving people so people can participate in terms of informed consent. The right to decline is an interesting one. Our expectation may be if a parent carer comes to a meeting that they're happy to speak up and say things. Not everybody does. And if somebody chooses not to participate, there shouldn't be any consequences for that. They should still be able to be an active member of the forum, and you should respect their decision decision not to participate in a particular piece of data gathering or research or consultation that you're doing. It's important that the person knows who to contact. So if you are doing a survey or you've put something on Facebook, or there's a named person or there's a clear role, there's a person to contact, particularly if they've got issues that they want to discuss as well. And permission, ask permission to use images or to quote from people. I think that the permission that you get is then for that particular instance and that specific. If you then use those images in a different context, maybe in a newsletter or something, you have to get permission to use it again. So be very clear that, yeah, the permission that you're seeking. And we know how important it is to maintain confidentiality. People don't want to be named in reports. I think occasionally you may decide that you're going to go with a powerful case study and there may be images attached, so it's clear who the family are in that instance, but they've given you permission for that. But when you're collating views and ideas, depersonalise it, make sure that it is confidential information. Work with integrity. So this is all about being honest and open about where your information, views or the issues come from, so when you're presenting it to others, and how many parents it relates to. Now, are there any conflicts of interest for those carrying out research or reporting on the research? An example we thought of was it may well be that a parent carer on your forum is also very involved in a local group that could be delivering services, possibly under short breaks. So if you're going to carry out you're going to have a couple of focus groups or you're looking at short break statements, that individual needs to be able to declare that interest and possibly step outside of some of the discussions. If you're asking parents to comment on the quality of that service delivery, or you're talking about budgets and spend, then really that person needs to step back and step aside. And the onus is on the individual to declare their conflicts of interest, really. And they will be many and varied. So the other key principle is how you're going to feed back to parents about the outcomes of any of your discussions and your surveys. So just be clear about that. You know, tell them it's going to be in our newsletter, it's going to be in our report, we're going to put it in a report to the council. So just be very clear about how you're going to be feeding back. And we thought we'd give you Positive Parents have given us a good example of influencing, making change. So in the last 2 years, they've been having quarterly meetings with their clinical commissioning group, and other providers come along to those meetings now. Now the meetings are open access. They're publicised through their membership network, their support group network, through special schools, through the Senkos, through a newsletter, so they're well publicised. The question time format means that individuals that are there can ask questions and they're selected then to be taken, and they're chaired by Healthwatch. Positive Parents themselves keep an action plan up to date using a traffic light system. Their traffic light system, just if you're interested, is amber means it's ongoing, works in progress. Green means the item's been dealt with and closed, and red means urgent actions required. I saw their action plan, I think it was dated for September last year, and that already had 8 items green that had been actioned and closed, 2 were in the red zone, and 13 amber. Talking to them, they've found it really important. They've got CAMs at the table, they've been looking at wheelchair service, they've been looking at lots of different aspects of equipment and support to remain independent. So these have been really important key meetings. I think one positive change that they've seen as a result of these is that hospital inpatient care, carers now have a proper recliner by the bedside if they need to stay overnight.
Okay, we're going to be looking at a range of languages throughout this presentation, and just to sort of be mindful of what they mean, this is our little jargon buster tip here. You'll hear data sets. This is all the information that we gather during the survey which needs to be analysed. You might hear demographics. This is a study of the population based on factors such as age, race, sex, economic status, level of education, income levels and employment. Indices of deprivation is another one. This is a measure of the local deprivation in your area. The JSNA stands for Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, and this is a tool used by local authorities and CCGs to monitor the health and well-being of their population. Okay. Where to find the information? Well, there's a range of places to look. The Office of National Statistics is one very, very large data set and contains the information for the whole of the UK. Knowing where to find what you're looking for can be really hard. So it's there, but it's like a needle in a haystack. So you need to be really clear what you're seeking. Another source is your local authority. The local commissioning group websites will have the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment pinned there, and you can reference that. And this will show you statistical information about the number of disabled children with SCND in your area. Lastly, the short break statement will show levels of need for families in your area and the range of provision that this amounts to. So it's really useful to know the main sources of information around to tap into. In Luton, we identified that the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment wasn't detailed enough, so we commissioned additional research to find out how many children and young people in the town actually did have a disability, and we realised that actually it was around 3,000 plus. So it's always worth knowing that if what you're looking for isn't there, there's an opportunity to have it commissioned. Okay, other sources are national charities, excellent sources actually. Contact a Family, Council for Disabled Children, MenCaps, Scope are just a few that produce their own reports and outline key issues for families. This can be really useful as background information or even evidence to back up your own case. Then you have legislation and regulation. The national quarterly standards can also help reflect on what's happening in the local level and identify areas of improvement and gaps that needs to be filled. You can talk to local health watch, as we've heard earlier from Barbara. They often have an information officer that produces regular newsletters and have a greater oversight of what's happening in the health side of things, and obviously CAF and the National Network of Parent Carer Forums. All of these are areas and people that have actually done areas of work that could be useful to parent carer forums themselves.
And I know, Kulwinder, you were telling me that you were, I think it might have been a regional meeting you were at, and Essex Health Watch had worked with young people. And,
that's right, yes.
And they produced a report.
They produced a really interesting report about young people and their levels of anxiety and depression at college. This was Essex Health Watch, and it was a regional meeting that was sometime September, October last year. It's often worth going to these regional meetings just because there is such a wealth of information that's being shared there. But definitely, yes, it was a really informative meeting, and Health Watch is a natural ally.
And we'll put that reference in our handouts actually for that report. It's called Yay, I think. Legislation and regulations, just to go back on that issue, we, Sarah Lee pointed out things like the home to school travel and transport statutory guidance, which was issued back in July 2014. She was saying it's documents like that and the work that's been done on short breaks that are useful for forums to look at, familiarise yourself with, and look at them what should be happening in your local area. And we all know that there's going to be the new joint CQC and Ofsted inspections in local areas, and I think they're going to come in and look across the board for health, social care and education.
That's right, and I think they're starting around April, because I've seen some adverts for recruiting, so
yeah.
There's a little plug for jobs there.
Okay. And I think we do know, I mean, Contact a Family and the LPCF have done a briefing paper around Health Watch and Parent Carer Forums and how you can work together. So send that out to your local Health Watch if you're not getting responses in the way that you would like. Okay, this is me, sorry, I was talking. So check out other like-minded support groups or voluntary organisations in your area. Look at whether they've impact or annual reports, because there may well be information there that's included in those reports that's really of interest and relevant to your issues. I've done some work with citizens advice bureaus over the last year, and they produce fantastic impact reports about a local area that goes into a lot of detail, so it would give you a lot of information about issues to do with income levels, disability benefits, access to and debt advice, and it may be something that's relevant. So just choose and have a look, but have a read and keep your mind open to some of those documents. An obvious place to get information is the LPCF and your region, so looking for news about key issues in other areas as well. And we've already said how important it is to keep your own membership database up to date. Keep it up to date and use it, look at what information's there that can help you. Our top tip is that you have to always remember to quote your sources of information. It's vital to do that. I mean, yeah, so if you are going to use the Essex Health Watch report, for instance, around young people, then you quote that in any of your documentation. So using information, this is just a little bit of a summary, what to do. Know where to find the information you need. So you might want to do a little checklist about what you've tried, what you've looked at. Double check things for accuracy. If you produce something as a forum and it's got inaccuracies in it, then it won't be given credibility. So do double check for accuracy. Use your individual stories to create your powerful case studies, and draw out lessons for everybody. This avoids what often gets talked about as anecdotal. That's anecdotal, or that's an individual issue, because there will be lessons for all from the individual case studies. And think across pan disability and the whole 0 to 25 age range. We know that can be difficult, it's a big ask, but do try and get your information across pan disability and 0 to 25. We know that there's a lot of talk about co-production. We know there's a lot of tremendous variation, really, in terms of whether it's working well or not, but it is something to aspire to. And I think that consultation, there are a lot of duties for health and statutory players to consult. So do get involved in that, and what we would say is, you know, the earlier the better, really. Kulwinder's going to say a little bit for the next slide around the difference between when you're collating numbers, quantitative information, as opposed to experience, the more qualitative issues. And always feedback. So families need to know if any action has happened as a result of what they've shared. Those of us that have been doing consultation for many years, often there's a level of apathy or cynicism, or people are not, they're saying, oh, not again, we've already done this before. But just make sure that you do feedback. And what we would say is, even if no action has happened as a result of it, you should feed that back as well, because that's an important issue. So Kulwinder's going to say a little bit more about knowing the difference.
Right, it's always important to know where to start and which approach to use. Now, there's two main approaches in research. You have the qualitative and the quantitative. As the qualitative suggests, it's about detail. You're really exploring, and you're trying to find out perhaps something you don't know, or you're trying to gain a deeper understanding of something. A good example might be, why do so few colleges offer good range of courses for students with SEND? Now, the methods used in qualitative research tend to be face-to-face interviews, focus groups. These can be recorded, or you can have people observing the outcomes. Alternatively, you've got quantitative. As the name suggests, it's around quantity, so we're looking at numbers. This is a more accurate measure and tends to be the one that is out there more often than the qualitative. A good example here is how many children that are known to the community paediatrician are also known to the GP. Again, methods used here are surveys. You can have surveys online, surveys over the phone, and additionally you have large data sets that require auditing. So those are just two different types, and it's useful to know how and when to use either or. A good example of a combination of these two methods is on the next slide.
It's further on.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
We'll come on to, yeah, we'll come back to that. The counting the cost report, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. What we thought we would just to do very quickly is look at how you can record some of the issues. Now, obviously at your forum you're going to have lots of contact, regular contact with parents. Now that might be formally in your meetings or at conferences and events, or possibly informally through your social media, coffee mornings, workshops. Phone calls. Now we know in Havering they have woofs and wellies, which means they go out walking the dog. They also have breakfast meetings. What we would say is it's harder to capture the information when it's raised in those informal discussions because you haven't got somebody with a flip chart, post-it notes and minuting. So you just need to be that little bit more disciplined about recording those issues as soon after the conversation as possible, really. It might help if you get another parent carer to ask you to summarise it, or that you have to give feedback at your next information. But really, by recording those issues, you're providing your evidence to back up your views. It really helps if you can reflect on what you've heard and think about whether the views you raise are then backed up by parents' actual experiences. So reflection time, rather than just reacting to everything, spend some time thinking about it. And of course it will give you a bank of evidence so that you can be much more transparent and open in all your discussions, particularly with the local authority. So at your meetings, it may be that a parent raises an issue. You could then ask for a show of hands from others who've got the same or similar experience, and you can count and record that number. I'm a bit of a fan of flip chart and post-it notes myself, so use flip chart in meetings when you've got smaller group discussions. Record the issues in this way. You can type that or photograph it and save it. When you get reports back from conferences and events and papers that are linked to that, there might be some themes and issues in there that you can tease out. If you've got training or workshops, often participants are asked to give feedback at the end, or issues are raised during the training and workshop. So you're always on the lookout and keeping your ears ready to pick up all those themes, really, for the recording. Now, you can create an issues log where you could record individual issues raised by parents, and you can count up how many parents have the same issue. Your advisors will have an example of such a log, and that uses Excel, or you can find free software on Google. You have to sign up to Google for that, but it is free software. You can post when you're recording things. Use your social media, your Facebook group or your Twitter, and post a question, see how many parents respond. Some forums and some places have created a texting service, so you could pose a question and ask parents to text yes if they've got a specific issue. These are all ways to actually deal with that side of it that are around quantity and responses. Okay, so we've already touched on the fact that you're posting questions, maybe to answer on the social media. That's always a good way to get information. It's a great way to communicate. Try not to overload people and keep things, try not to put too much in one posting. I think the simpler it is, the better for everybody. Collaboration with colleagues. We know that there are a lot of people that you're trying to work with day to day in the council, education, health, voluntary sector. They may have particular need to consult with parent carers, or an emphasis on co-producing on services and strategies. The earlier the better, really, that you do that. And I know in Havering they were saying that really that's the key to it, trying to have those good relationships on the ground, mean that when issues are taken forward that you're listened to and that action happens as a result of it. You can consider combining forces with other forums, and possibly to work with a researcher if there's some funding for that. And that's if you want to do stuff in a bit more in-depth. Now, one example that we've seen is the What Works for Us report. So 4 forums in the South East, Brighton and Hove, East Sussex, Hampshire and West Sussex, back in June 2014, did their submission report to the Council of Disabled Children. That was all about what parent carers and families wanted in terms of the independent support programme. So do consider combining forces. What we do know is that often the return rate for surveys can be low, and parent carers themselves often find face-to-face or telephone contact much better way to engage. So offering those opportunities for the informal discussions, getting people to come in, drop-ins, coffee mornings, they're really good ways to get people's views. Having said that, if you want to incentivise it, some forums have offered vouchers, say to the first 10 or 20 respondents when they have posted on surveys. And you're really trying to use every opportunity to talk about the important issues for your parent carers, and you're trying to capture any of those themes emerging. So share these themes at your next meeting and decide, is it something that needs following up? If it is, who needs to know about this particular issue and who can act on it, so that you're being very specific in what action you're going to take, really.
Right, so designing a survey. Now, it's always a good idea to have a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve, why you're doing it, and some of the audience that you're targeting it at. So we start off by having a broad idea of what we want. So avoid bias, don't give away the answers in your questions, and don't ask questions that are leading. Okay, use clear language and the right tone. Keep the length in mind. You don't want a really long survey. It'll put people off as soon as they've started. And ensure confidentiality. Again, the things that we've touched on earlier. Decide if we need to keep it anonymous or not. Some people may not fill out a questionnaire knowing that their details might be shared. Others might not mind, but it's always worthwhile considering that. Okay, so our top tip there is you need to start out with a clear understanding, and you need to know what you're trying to achieve. Okay, ask other forums what surveys they've done. It's a good idea to see if you can use that. Obviously credit the source, but it's better than reinventing the wheel. Now, Kent Parent Carer Forum have a click-on section on their website for parent carers to complete interactive surveys. Currently they have 13 open across a whole range of topics. When you have a moment, do click on the link and have a look. In addition to that, if you want some really detailed advice on how to write surveys, there's a good guide for non-researchers produced by Dr. Burgess at the University of Leeds. Again, you can click onto that link later.
Okay, now this slide is a slide. We've put this slide on here because we were thinking about the importance of how you describe issues in terms of then what solutions and options can be come up with afterwards. The triangle with all the images on is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now that was originally devised by Maslow back in the 1950s, but it's quite a well-recognised hierarchy of needs, particularly in terms of how you motivate people and how you work together and what individuals need in life. So starting at the bottom, we all have to have our physiological needs met. So that's, you know, warmth, food, water, and then safety needs. We all need to feel that we are safe, being looked after, safeguarded. And then it moves up the hierarchy. So once you've had your physiological needs met and your safety needs met, you're then looking at love and belonging. It's important to connect and to be part of something other than just you as an individual. Going up, you can see that esteem is next. So things around your own personal potential and your own achievements and what you'd like to be doing in life. To the top, which is around self-actualization. So that really is somebody that's feeling that they've achieved what they want to achieve, and yeah, they're getting on with life. Now, what we thought was, what often happens with children and young people with disabilities is that everybody gets a bit stuck at the first two levels, the physiological and the safety needs, and don't really think about love and belonging and connecting with others, although that's vital, as is esteem, as is self-actualization, because everybody has potential and should be able to reach their potential. So we were just thinking it might be a useful way to start thinking about how you describe your issues, or start thinking about your solutions and challenge some of that. And of course, alongside that is the social model of disability. Now, the social model of disability is really came from the disability movement. it's the opposite of the medical model of disability. Now, in the medical model, that very much puts the onus on the individual to either change or be treated, or something happens on an individual level. Clearly, in the social model, people with impairments are disabled by the fact that they've been excluded from participation within the mainstream of society, and that's a result of the physical, organisational attitudes in society. So you're really looking at removing those barriers and enabling people to participate fully, to have independence, choice and control. So we just thought, it's just worth thinking about how you're describing things to then actually get the change that you want to see. Okay, so when you're presenting a case, you're always thinking about your audience. So what do they know already? What are their interests? I mean, if you're going to a group, other support groups in the area, you want to make sure that the language is accessible, that you're using visuals possibly, that you're thinking about their cultural interests. So, but if you're going to a scrutiny panel, then that's a different audience, and you're finding ways to present information for that audience. But our real message is keep it simple and powerful and highlight your key points. If you're going to present something verbally, then rehearse what you want to say with another parent carer. You might know that you've got 10 minutes on an agenda or 10 minutes at a conference to present something. So do practice in advance. I facilitate a lot of meetings, and I'll say to people, you've got 10 minutes, and they always say, oh, I won't need that long, and invariably they go on twice as long. It just is an opportunity to rehearse. And if you're putting things in writing, if it can be on one page, that would be great. If it's more detailed and it needs to be a longer paper, which often it does need to be, make sure that you've got a short summary at the beginning.
Right, now assuming you've collected all your data, you've analysed it, now you want to present your results. It's always a good idea to use pictures as well as articles and written text. So we know that people are 30 times more likely to read something that's got images in as opposed to just text alone. Infographics is something we've come across recently, and it's a good idea to use when you have large data sets and when you have maps to show or timelines or comparisons to make. The aim is to have more images and less text. Now the software is free to start off with, and it can be downloaded at those 2 points shown there on your screen. I've used Infographics to show the Luton membership data that we saw earlier in the slides, and it was really quite straightforward to use. The method, you can create your own images, and you're allowed different image types to be pulled on, so graphs, etc. Clip art is another way. You can use Publisher and use your own images through clip art or photographs that you've collected. It's all about making the data accessible, easy to understand and easy to digest, and actually inviting. A really good example is the report that CAF produced called Counting the Cost in 2014. Now here you can see that we have figures and we have quotes. Now this is an excellent example of how qualitative and quantitative data have been used to a very powerful effect. So if we start off by looking at the first slice of the pie of 83% of families with disabled children say they're going without food. Now 83% is a big number, but to really contextualise that, you have the quote at the bottom there, which says that I go without food on a daily basis. I make £30 shop last 2 weeks. If there's any more money left for the electricity, then if there's no money left for electricity, then we go without electricity. Now that is bringing that whole 83% to life. It's making that whole example more powerful, and therefore leading the reader to go away and have a real sense of what hardships are being caused by certain cuts. So this is how data can be really informative and really powerful.
Thank you. Okay.
Right, so presenting your case number 3, we can focus on solutions and options as well as highlighting issues.
And we know a good example that we've been sent, that Sarah sent us, was in Richmond, Send Family Voices and Achieving for Children. They've produced a guide to reasonable adjustments this January, and in there the options, there's lots of options and lots of solution focus, so it's a really good document that pulls all that thinking together.
Right. Another way is to feed back to the DFE directly through your SEND surveys. Now, you know, you can try and do this by yourself, or you can do it in partnership. I mean, in Luton we tried to fill out the form and realised that most of the form would be blanks. So rather than send back a large form with many blanks in, we contacted the various different departments in the authority and completed it in partnership. This had a twofold effect. It enabled us to increase our knowledge of area service delivery that we had no knowledge of, but also it ensured that partnership working and co-production was seen to be happening at that level.
Okay, I'm hoping people have been posting questions, because we're doing very well. We may be speeding, I hope we're not going too fast, but we're doing well for time. So hopefully you've been able to post questions and Ruth will pass those through to us. In terms of presenting your case, the things to try and avoid are presenting inaccurate information, and exaggerating your numbers because of an agenda. So there may be things that you really, really want to see happening, and possibly they're tipping over into more of a campaigning, lobbying issue in your local area. But as a forum, really try not to exaggerate numbers. Try to avoid asking leading or biased questions. So it may be somebody, I don't know, you may have a view that inclusion is what should be the picture within education. So if you're looking at education needs, allowing other parent carers to express views that are not about inclusion, it's just thinking about issues like that, making sure that you're not biasing your questions in any way. Avoid being overly emotive. Now this is a difficult one, but what we do find is that often if parent carers are raising issues and clearly it's touching on things that are very difficult for them, and they may get upset and angry or frustrated, what happens in a meeting is that other people pick up on that emotion, and then often what's being said doesn't get heard because of the emotion. So that's what we mean by avoid being overly emotive. If you know that you've got a particular issue on at the moment and it will mean at a meeting you will find it hard, then maybe someone else can present that issue for you, possibly. You have to declare conflicts of interest and think about what they might be, because they could be many and varied, but really it's just about being honest and open with each other. And avoid using the situation to lobby on your own behalf. That does everybody a disservice, really. And what you will find in meetings is that officers will shut down. They'll start doing that thing of saying, we'll talk about this afterwards, or let's do this outside of the meeting. So if you hear yourself starting to go down the talking about your own issue at a meeting, try and take a few deep breaths and stop and rethink, and take up the offer of talking outside of the meeting with the officer, but don't use the meeting time or in reports to lobby on your own behalf. And remember, you've got to feed back, because people need to know that what they're telling you is going to make a difference, and people want to see those improvements in outcomes. So they're the things to try and avoid. Now, we thought we would end on another example from Havering, positive parents influencing service provision. Look at those fantastic different adaptive bikes. 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, they realised that the short breaks money coming into Havering wasn't really reaching families. So they spoke to their members, the parent carers, who identified, they were talking about leisure and short break provision, but they identified that there were very few family leisure activities on offer in the large country park. and this was an important thing. If we remember, we go back to our Maslow, that's about love and belonging and connecting, really. So there wasn't enough on for the whole family to participate in. So they negotiated with the council to spend some of the short breaks grant money on a range of accessible bikes after presenting this data and this information. And they actually went out and researched other similar accessible bike schemes in the country, and particularly highlighted the health benefits, really, of getting out in the fresh air and exercise. So they were able to work in partnership with the council and the park team, and they created and added a range of 8 differently adapted vehicles to the regular fleet of bikes that were available in the park. It's Thames Chase Country Park. People have to pay, there's some reasonable higher costs, but the adapted vehicles are there, and in fact Thames Chase Country Park have decided it's such a fantastic scheme that they've extended it and bought other vehicles for other parks. So this was all done 2 years ago, and so now you can see that everyone can enjoy the great outdoors. Really, we're on our last slide. We're going to start looking at questions in a minute. But I suppose what we both wanted to say, that really it's doing it and the action that will give you confidence and courage in what you want to do. I'm just going to pass that question back to Kulwinder just for a moment. So please do make a start if you haven't done already. I mean, you may be one of those forums that's already produced fantastic reports and documents and data and has lobbied and got that information.
Case we want to see them.
Yeah, in which case share those with us, please. But if you haven't tried anything, then, you know, start small, think about an issue that's a burning issue in your area, and give it a go. I also just I meant to say earlier on at the top of the presentation that I was looking at some talks on TED, on the TED website, which is a very good website for giving a bit of inspiration. And there was a researcher, a woman called Susan Ettlinger. She happens to be a parent carer of her son has autism, but she only reveals that part way into the talk, and interestingly she gets quite emotional when she talks about it, but takes a few deep breaths and carries on. But what she said was the data itself doesn't create the meaning, we do. So we think that's quite an important message, that the information that you get isn't the end of it. You have to then interpret that and look at it. And she really emphasises the importance of focusing on your critical thinking skills. So it's just giving yourself time to reflect and think about what that information is telling you. Okay, so we have a question here. Where can you find information? What if your local authority keeps saying they are updating their short break statement and have been doing so for over a year, but are not finalising it? Very good question.
It is indeed. Where would you find information? Well, we touched upon several areas at the beginning of the presentation where you can look at charitable websites, Contact a Family, Scope, the Council for Disabled Children, the National Children's Bureau. All of these are national charities that will have data that you could draw on. In addition to that, you have the local authority own websites, your strategic JSNA, and the Office of National Statistics as well. So those are just a few areas of general data sets, but every local authority department will have their own data crunching section, as it were, and you have, you know, you can just email them and ask for local data.
I think the question, I don't know if this is the case, but it's the thing that local authority keeps saying they're updating it and have over a year and are not finalising it. I think it's legitimate to ask for the work in progress, what information they have so far, because the not final document is one thing, but they must have information because they will be commissioning and spending money, and there'll be providers providing short breaks. I suppose you could try and see if you can find the information out through different sources, maybe going direct to the providers and see what they've been offering, because you know, they'll be on grant assistance, and they should be able to say how many sessions they've provided, if it's a residential provision or a daycare provision. But yeah, that's a difficult one really. But I suppose what you're trying to do is find somebody at the local authority end who has a responsibility around short breaks, and use the regulations and the guidance as well, because there's a lot of guidance, statutory guidance on short breaks. So familiarise yourself with that, and then you can use that to quote and say to the local authority, look, you know, you do have to be doing this, you do have to be sharing this information. And I do know in some areas freedom of information requests go in, but I'm not quite sure, I don't know enough about that. But what we will do with this question is we'll explore it some more with Gail and the team, and when we post up all the questions afterwards, there'll be a fuller reply. Okay.
Okay, this isn't actually a question, it's a very good point, and it needs to be shared. The DFE also has available information that can help forums in particular with regards to comparing their local authority against others and looking at outcomes. So that's a useful tip there, so thank you to the person that sent that in. It's actually highlighting that in addition to the websites and the information that we've shared, the DFE also has quite a lot of information on their website, so do look at that as well.
Okay. I don't think we've got any other questions at the moment. We'll just give people because we're a little bit, we've got a few more minutes, we'll just give people a little bit of time to see if there's any more questions to come through to Ruth. What I'm wondering, Kulwinder, is whether there's anything in terms of Luton, whether there's, when you mentioned that you had with the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, it didn't really have the detailed information in there, and that you talked about commissioning a little piece of research that identified your 3,000 young people. Did you pay for that through the forum? Was it something?
No. That was actually the local authority that paid for that piece of research. We just jumped on the bandwagon because we could use the data for our own needs. And really it was all about the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment is actually a very, very large document. It has so many subsections of the area and the population that it has to cover that actually our area, children with disabilities, is very small. It'll only give you very, well, I suppose it varies from authority to authority, but certainly in Luton it gave a very overview, short section, and it wasn't really enough to be making detailed decisions on. And I think the council recognised that, and it was for that reason that they'd paid for the researcher to be commissioned, and we obviously used the data once it was commissioned. So it's worth knowing what your local authority is doing so that you can tap into it and inevitably use it.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have any more questions, and maybe we do. Ruth's just arrived. Okay. Thank you. So, would you be able to share the DFE link information, or what do we search for?
Yes.
We will share it.
We'll definitely do that. We'll make sure it's there for you.
Yeah. And I know that
our local authority doesn't have...
Ruth's just continuing that question.
Oh, right.
She hasn't quite finished it. And I know Gail wanted us to just say, obviously people, if there's individual issues, people do know that there's the Contact a Family free phone helpline. So to use that number as well for any individual issues. But obviously we're talking more, forum-wide issues. And Ruth's just finishing off a question that's come in, so we're just waiting on that.
I'd just like to add a point that with regards to local data, I've mentioned that your local authority will have a data department as such. It's worth finding out who the person in charge of that department is and making links with them. I've always found that a really useful way of getting local data and therefore using the local data to build your own case. So, that's just something that we've used and found really helpful.
And the other thing I've just been working with a forum in London, and I know that they're just starting to see the fruition of some work that has been done over a number of years. There's some reports that were done about probably 8 years ago, and now just starting to come through and to be seen as changes in terms of strategic direction. So we do have to have a level of resilience and perseverance that keeps plugging away at the issues, and I know that at times can feel incredibly frustrating, particularly with all the changes in local authority and the changes of personnel, changes of structure, individuals. But it does pay to stick with it and to follow things through, because the need doesn't go away, and the more you can come up with solutions and options, the better the chances are to get the improvements in services.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're really conscious that we've perhaps gone over the area of how to produce a survey, hold focus groups very quickly, and if it is an area that you would like more information on, then it's always worth emailing in afterwards as well. So please do send in that.
Okay, so there's a request. Can we have a copy of the action plan traffic light system? I will check out with Karen in Havering, and even if you can't have the specific Havering document, we'll be able to put something together that gives you that information. But absolutely, yep. And I think this might be our last question or point. So where parent forums are trying to reach more parent carers and know that the local authority are in contact with many families, how can forums work with local authorities to reach these families when the local authority are not willing / able to share contact details?
Right, well, I'm really pleased that you've asked that question, because that's exactly the starting point that we had in Luton, and the way we tackled it was obviously we couldn't have the information of it. We have over 1,000 families that have children with statements at present in Luton, and many more on the SEN support register. So as a forum, we were not even scratching the tip of that iceberg, and we're very conscious of that. So on approaching the authority, we were aware that we wouldn't be given those names and details, and quite rightly we wouldn't want them. But what we did negotiate with them is that every letter that was sent out to those families, our logo strapline was included on it, with perhaps a leaflet saying get in touch with your Parent Carer Forum, and through that hopefully we'll see some more people accessing the forum.
And I think use those other networks as well. I mean, Senko networks, your school networks, the other support groups that are in the area, because I mean, the local authority, those families the local authority know about will also be known in other places. People, it's not just information that the local authority have. And there's ways and ways, aren't there, of sharing contact details. As Kulwinder said, you wouldn't expect them. No forum is going to give over its contact list to anybody else because of data protection and those issues. So you do come up against that. But it really is about going out, finding your allies in the area, finding out who's got, who's like-minded, who's wanting to see the same changes and improvements. Right, we've got a question here, well, a statement here maybe. Our local authority doesn't have JSNA information. Just keep coming up blank with any questions. They have to have a joint strategic needs assessment, so maybe this means that they don't have anything that's very detailed or specific around children and young people with disabilities.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's right. Every authority does have to have one. It's a requirement. So all we can suggest really is try again. I mean, it's something that needs to be there, and if it's coming up with blank, that's not right. You should be able to.
Yeah. And the other big change that happened over the last year or so is that public health have gone back under local authorities, and I think it might be worth talking to your public health colleagues about issues, particularly if there are, you know, health implications of some of the things that you're trying to achieve. Because I know certainly in one forum, the Public Health Department carried out a bit of detailed research around early help and early prevention, which they've used in a document. So maybe try your public health colleagues.
And also Health Watch.
Yes,
so,
back to Health Watch. Okay, we're out of time, and so, oops, gone. Thank you for coming along today. That was great. We really appreciate you signing up to this webinar. Remember the short questionnaire at the end. If you can fill it out, you've got a few moments, please do. Tell us what else you'd like to know about. This recording will be on the website, but we are going to work very hard on making sure that the handouts, there's the time, see, time's up, making sure that the handouts cover all of our references and other information, and we'll include that around the Department of Education as well. Big thank you to everyone, Ruth, Gail, Sarah, Julie, Positive Parents, and thank you, Kulwinder. It's been a pleasure. And please do think about what you can take away. That's the important thing for us, that you actually go away and you think about making a change and getting something in terms of making your case. So good luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you.